Yeah. I hate that when that happens, not being able to switch users or you get logged onto the wrong one. Yeah, I get that with the company one as well. Okay, morning, Mike. Morning, Ricky. Yep, and we'll come to that, Mike. IMF. Okay. All right. So, yep, the first thing on the agenda this morning is we have a new Governor General.
Yes, we do.
Louise Arbour was installed as the 31st Governor General, and she basically is saying that let's not slow our momentum towards our fear of, towards progress out of fear of differences. Extreme polarization is dangerous, but so is extreme consensus. It is through our differences and our fundamental rights to express them that we will nourish critical thinking, creativity, and innovation. That was her words upon her installation speech.
Yes, indeed. So anyway, but it does sound really kind of old-fashioned too. It sounds like the last generation of liberals. It talks about diversity, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It talks about diversity. That I don't know. It kind of like sounds like the last generation, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, okay, but the thing is, she's she's putting a speech together that's based upon based upon her values, etc., which she brings to the job, of course, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. And now Mike, of course, is saying that, hey, no, what was he saying? Hey, the Governor General and the Senate should be abolished. Yep.
Yes, it should be. Yes, thank you for that, Mike. But the problem with even a guy like many people who don't like the Senate and don't like the attachment to the crown. I think we've outlived all those things a long time ago. To stay in the Commonwealth, if it's any benefit to us economically, sure, do it. But yeah, we should dump the king, get rid of him. We don't need him, and never did. And
I'm gonna call Cousin Charles on that. About that. How disloyal his subjects are.
Well, tell him I'll meet him on Epstein Island, where his brother hung out. Oh. Yeah, we really need that kind of people in helping us in our government. But it's great for Britain. That whole royalty thing. It says it brings in a lot of tourist dollars into the country by just having the king and the queen and all that. And you can see what Gaga.
I never thought it did in Britain.
How Gaga Trump goes over there. Every time he goes over there, goes to Buckingham Palace or something. He really likes. He wants one of those crowns too.
Yeah, I've never bought the argument that that the royals were good for tourism in Britain. It's not true.
Well, that's what you said.
Amount, but not that much.
We've had that discussion before, and I remember reading, wondering why they were in power, and then reading things about and this is some years ago, like about 20 years ago. They reckon about $1 billion of tourist money comes in just because of the interest in the royalty and the old-fashioned king and queen stuff.
But I'd rather have that $1 billion. As a Brit, I would rather have that $1 billion go to investment in British industry.
Sure, but how are you going to talk somebody into doing that? One's a tourist thing and one's an industrial thing.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Hey, everybody that came to Britain for our holiday and left $1 billion here, I don't want you to do that anymore. I want you to invest in a British company.
Yeah,
that ain't going to happen.
I know what you're saying. There's two different standards there. Yeah.
But anyway, we could just, like, I mean, that's up for the Brits to do anyway. But we can dump them. We don't need them. And yeah, and the Senate is just it's a payoff. It's a payoff for.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't
yeah.
be. It should be elected.
Yeah, get rid of it. We could use. I don't know if we're looking for the Parliament itself as a check and balance on all that stuff. The Senate originally was set up in Britain so that the rich people could watch out for what the common people are doing. They kind of have it was set up. We are the aristocracy. We are the rich and landowners and stuff like that. You are the common people. That's why it was the House of Commons. And so it was a balance. Like, we're the rich, you're the common people, so we're kind of balance each other off. But we don't have that kind of thing going on here, do we?
Yeah. Well, the House of Lords is different than the Senate because the House of Lords.
No, but it was based on it. It was based on it, isn't it? Right.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. The Senate was, obviously. Yeah. Anyway. I think the thing about the Senate is, and again, I think there's a position for the House of Lords, there's a position for an upper chamber, but I think it should be elected, but done on a different basis.
Well, we can put it in as a check and balance kind of thing, like they have in the United States, but our government system is different. I think a parliamentary system that we have is kind of like self-checking itself, as long as you have different parties in the same. Like you see the Congress in the States, so those are elected positions. But the Senate has, it's an odd thing because it like a state like New Hampshire that has very few people has 2 senators, whereas as a state like Texas or California has huge populations, but they still only have 2 senators. So the
biggest diversity of that one, of course, is not so much about it's actually places like North and South Dakota. Right, the big population centers have exactly the same numbers of senators as the tiny, mediocre little states that probably really should only have half a senator.
Well, that's what I just said.
Yeah,
you got New Hampshire that has 2 senators with a very small population, which is the same as the 2 senators that Texas and California have, which are huge population centers.
Yeah.
Or even their neighboring New York, So that was designed so that the individual states don't get bowled over by the bigger, more powerful, influential states. But that falls into a place where representation is really kind of funny there, but those are elected positions at least.
Yeah.
So
they are elected positions. Yeah.
So do we need a check and balance system here in the parliamentary system? I don't know. Does Australia have a house? Does Australia have a Senate?
I don't actually know. I believe they do. Yes, I believe they do. Okay, here's a question for Nancy. Good morning, Nancy. As an American watching the show, we have a Senate that is not elected but is appointed by the Prime Minister. Members are appointed by the Prime Minister, promoted by the Prime Minister into the Senate. Do you think that's a good system, or should we elect them?
Well, let's make it clear. The current Prime Minister, when a Senate seat becomes available, he can appoint somebody for that. So what they usually do is they appoint someone who has political leanings that are similar to the party that he is. Yeah. When the Conservatives get in, or any other party get in, so what you have is a Senate that's made up of mostly conservative and liberal appointees, and they are they lean ideologically conservative or liberal. So you can't just wipe out the Senate and appoint everybody you need. You need a seat to be available. Now the senators are allowed to stay until they're 75 years old.
And basically, Mike is saying the Senate is nothing but a power grab for the rich, appointed, not elected, appointed by the acting Prime Minister. Yeah.
It's actually a reward system. Yeah. So you take somebody like Mike Duffy, who got a Senate seat. he was a journalist, but he was also a huge moneymaker for the Conservative Party. He campaigned and drummed up a lot of campaign donations for the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
So when the Conservatives got into government, they made Mike Duffy a senator. Now, they also tried to make Frank Mahovlich a senator. He was a hockey player. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I was going to say. So somebody like yourself, if you were, say, an Olympic gold medalist at wrestling, they might want to make you a senator as well.
Well, yeah, and I'd be more likely to get elected as an MP because I would have the popularity of doing what I was doing. Like Mike Strange is here. Like Mike Strange is kind of like the worst politician of all time, and yet he keeps getting elected. He gets the most votes of anyone because people like him. He's an amiable sort of fellow, and he does a lot of things for cancer, for children and stuff. So he's very, very effective in those things, but he stinks as a politician. Yeah. So that's the problem. There's a reward system with the Senate. So you do a lot. If you do a lot of stuff for us, we're going to give you a nice plump appointment with a nice juicy kind of expensive count, and you got a nice fat juicy pension and all this. It's a real award, and you can fly about the country anywhere you went. As we found out, the rules of the Senate were so ambiguous that it cost us $28 million to find out if $1 million was used fraudulently, because the rules of ethics for the Senate are so ambiguous that all manner of corruption and abuse of the system could not be effectively used against the senators they believed were abusing the system, because the rules are so vague that there's nothing to bite onto, and they were made that way purposely. So we don't need a body like that. Get rid of it.
Well, okay, all right. I believe that there's a need for an upper chamber, but I also believe it should be elected. Anyway, we'll put that one aside. All right, moving on. Ontario spent an additional $465 million on OSAP last year, an additional. So it doubled up on its OSAP spending.
Well, yeah. So what it is, though, what the accusations are here is the government has reduced the amounts of grants and loans available to most people in the public education system. Our education system is much cheaper than it is from our neighbor down south, because there's lots more subsidies and much more available money from the government. Generally speaking, we make our education cheaper and more available to those people who are good at what they do, if they're good students. Now, my own oldest boy he did not have to pay for his master's at all. It was all paid for with grants because he had done so well in university up until that time. He was always on the Danes list, so we got breaks there on his tuition. And so when he was finished, he got this big grant to go ahead and do the rest of his master's. And he could have got another one to go on for his PhD, but by that time he was sick. He wanted to get out and start working. So, and we didn't have to pay a penny basically as parents. He got the grant, and he went and he worked. He did his master's at the University of Western, and we didn't even have to pay for his lodgings. He's enough money to get an apartment and do his education. So we really lucked out there. And so, those are positive things. And what it does is it helps produce a better educated person, and it rewards them for the efforts they make. However, the average person going through, they require loans and grants from the government. And what the government doing is say, this is costing us too much money. Yeah. But what happens here is the private sector colleges are getting a huge amount of money. That that amount of money is not being factored in. It makes it look as if the government has reduced the amount of money laid out for public sector, the public universities. But what it's done is it's added a bunch of money to the private ones, private colleges and private universities.
Well, actually, it's not added a bunch of money to those colleges. It's added money in order to allow students to go through those colleges.
Well, when they say that they reduced the amount of money, and then they don't include this part, I guess, the $460 million that go to private. Now, that's not all that bad, because a lot of the private stuff is supposed to go towards trades and things like that. So to help people get into the trades. And a lot of the private colleges fast track trade certifications and other certifications that way, because it's nothing new. They can concentrate the education process. You know, they can go a whole year instead of 2 different years.
Exactly, and that, because in fact they are dealing with, maybe they take a 2-year program and they or a 3-year program, and they try squeeze it down to 18 or 20 months or something like that, right?
Yeah. So, but the problem is it's going into one of those. It's going into the coffers of private industry. In other words, it's going into private profit colleges.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, students who go through those colleges have got as much right to go through college as those at public universities and public colleges, right?
It's not about rights at all. It's not about rights at all. It's about how the money is spent and who gets it. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? And it says here right in the very beginning, when the Premier Doug Ford government drastically cut student assistance grants earlier this year, cited unsustainable cost. But new figures show nearly all of the recent growth was among private career college students, right?
Yeah.
So basically, the data obtained by the Canadian press through the Freedom of Information request show that between 2023 and 24 and 25 academic years, the province spent $465 million more on Ontario Student Assistance Program grants, and 95% of that went to private career college students out of the public realm.
Yeah, but again, those that are going through private career colleges still need to be funded.
I don't think there's any that's not the issue. That's not the issue. I don't think anybody disagrees with that at all.
Yeah.
It questions why it is directed to where it is directed, right? So Doug Ford used the rising cost of OSAP as his excuse to gut student aid, slashing the grant portion from 85% down to 20%, and leaving students to take on more debt. The students apply for financial aid and blah, 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 blah. Okay. And the university students received about $300 million in Ontario student grants in 23-24. The amount actually decreased, and it goes on like that. And then it goes, career college students, however, received $554 million in Ontario student grants in 23-24. Following the year, they received about $994 million. That is more than the amount of Ontario student grants for public college and university students combined. So basically, how many people does it serve? Where is it directed, and why? And Merrick Garland said that most of the increases in career college usage, it looks like the government was just looking for an excuse to cut all OSAP spending and to redirect it. So anyway, just trying to get down to the nib of it here.
Very quick question out here. What is OSAP? I'm not from Ontario, live in Manitoba, right? Yeah, OSAP is the Ontario Student Assistance Program. It's basically a loan system for any student who wants to take further education in Ontario. right? And Rick, I noted this. You're taking basket weaving, and you need 35,000. We ain't going to get 35 grand for basket weaving. Got to be joking,
Well,
man.
you will if you are you know I know you will get $35,000 to be a pilot if you're a black blind lesbian, that kind of thing. No, that doesn't happen. That might happen. That may have used to happen. That doesn't happen anymore. That kind of thing. It's I think basically student deserve to know the evidence. Blah blah blah. They take a long time to get to the meat and potatoes of this. Really, the Ontario Auditors General in 2018 said the province projected a 50% increase in net annual cost of OSAP due to these changes. So, okay, yeah, there is. Now, what is career college? Career college can be anything like the private ones. Basically, what it does, it zeroes in on it. It accelerates a lot of times, even right down to the trade systems.
Yeah.
Funding. They are privately run, not publicly. So career colleges often have higher tuition levels. And a recent Freedom of Information request on OSAP by the news outlet, the Trillium, found that 24-25 university college students received 5,500 to 7,000 on average in grants, while career college students received more than 15,000 on average. So there you have it. Is the implication here is the government is favoring the private colleges for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really, it's another dissatisfactory type of article. It has a lot of explanation of what's OSAP is and where the money's going. But it does point out here that there is a discrepancy. Where is private college money going to public universities and so on? But we find that there's nothing much wrong with the private colleges. Basically, they are accelerating things like trades, even as much right down to the average tradesman. Like you might go in for automotive or welding or something like that in a college, in a private college, and it might accelerate get your tickets.
When I went through Trios, the college that I had, they had basically massage therapy. They had web design. They had law clerk, paralegal. They had a couple of other programs that I don't remember. So primarily practical programs like web design, basically being that you'd end up building websites.
Yes. So I don't know.
And then again, also, they did trade as well, but not in the school, not in my school. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just like when the government says that the pressure on the system is too high, and that's why they have to reduce the amount of grants and easy loans for students. This article pretty well says, well, no, they're not really. They're funneling more money into the private college system than you think, and really it doesn't really tell you. And it seems that the private colleges are getting more per student. So I would like to have that explained, though. So if you are, for instance, if you're going in as an auto mechanic, you're doing your trades in a private college as an auto mechanic, you're going to need your course is going to need fuel for the cars. It's going to need a car. It's going to need cars to work on. It's going to need parts to put in and take out. It costs a lot more than somebody who's taking accountant course and everything's on paper and on a computer. So if you are going to take a course that involves, it's going to cost a lot more in a trade. If you're going to take a course in science where there's a lot of lab stuff to do, it's going to take a lot more money than it is to become a teacher, let's say.
Yeah.
Whereas a teacher, you don't have to go into a lab. You don't have to use expensive equipment to test this or that or whatever, or learn how to do that. So that's part of it. That's part of something that we don't really realize. If you go to Brock University right now and you take a liberal arts course, or you take let's say a history course, right? And you want to become a history teacher, and then somebody else goes into the sciences. Well, the science course, you may pay a similar tuition to that person that's in the science course, and they will use a lot more facilities that the university has than you do.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
what the equipment is used depends upon the course that you're doing. I remember, for example, I did geography at school. We had, as part of my geography option that I did, we had like 3 field trips a year, geography and geology, right? To go and look at, things that you could only study in the wild.
Well, the whole point is some forms of education cost more.
Yeah.
And this article does not explore that. What is the private college getting the money for? Why are they getting $15,000 on average per student? And the regular universities and public universities are only getting $5,000 to $7,000 per student.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you that. It doesn't explore what the private industries are doing. It kind of implies
a lot of the private colleges are, as you pointed out before, are done on these accelerated programs.
Yeah.
Whereas the public colleges take 4 years to do what they do in 1.5 years in a private college.
Yeah. So, in any case, let's get our people educated.
Yeah.
Let's get them educated.
All right. Okay, so I've got one more comment that we can go for. We have AI for that, Dave. Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on. There was a Russian drone attack upon the Chornobyl on a site near the Chornobyl former nuclear plant. Right. Chernobyl. Yeah. Former nuclear plant. The other thing is that Ukraine, Kiev has released hundreds of drones after Putin attacked Zelensky. Putin rejected Zelensky's meeting request.
Yeah, Putin's in a jam too. He thinks he's going to win by attrition, and he might in the end, because Russia has a lot more people they could put onto the front lines, and I've got more than you do, and I'm going to win. But right now, that might not be working for the Russians because they're losing an incredible amount of men and casualties. The whole war, as you remember, in the very beginning of the war, the U.S. artillery shell count went way down because they were supplying the Ukrainians with artillery shells, and old antiquated weapons that they had around. They're sending anything and everything to Ukraine. Now the Ukrainians have kind of taken over and realized that drone warfare is the way to go, and the artillery took 98% of the casualties, was responsible for about 98% of the casualties at the beginning of the war. But even though artillery is not gone from, it's mostly drones. Drones have been able to sort of overcome a whole lot of problems that the Ukrainians have. They can, with a handful of very inexpensive drones, they can really reap a lot of damage on the Russians. So the Russians are making their summer offensive, and they're going millimeter at a time, basically, and it's costing them a lot of blood.
But
however,
again,
what the Russians will do to make up for this is to launch very deadly missile attacks into the Ukraine. And one of these missiles came very close to Chernobyl, and we know all about Chernobyl, don't we?
Yeah, and there's a danger, of course, if there's an attack on Chernobyl, does that basically spike radiation for, because Chernobyl is actually concreted over. It's a place of special attention, and if there was a successful attack upon that, would it release radiation?
Quite possibly, but the Chernobyl plant is running. like the one that melted down, that's all taken care of, and but the Chernobyl plant is still running, it's still providing power.
Yeah.
So the problem, I don't know how long it was mothballed, or if part of it was mothballed, the other wasn't. We know the whole area in and around there was poisoned, with poison basically with high rates of radiation. Even now, I don't know, but anyway, there are nuclear facilities there. If you bomb them, what does that mean? You are going to reduce the amount of power, but you also you also set off the situation where you have poison, nuclear poison, basically radiation coming out of there, nuclear waste, all that kind of stuff. So there are certain rules I think they've made, like you don't bomb our nuclear facilities, we won't bomb yours. But this one came pretty close. Basically, what the Russians are doing, however, I think probably when they bombed something close to Chernobyl, they were probably just trying to take out the power lines, maybe the switch yards and things of that kind. You know, maybe not the reactor itself, because that would cause the Ukraine to fight back in kind. You don't want to get into that tit for tat. I'll knock out your nuclear, you knock out my nuclear. But what the Russians are basically doing is they're trying to make up for their lack of progress in the field by knocking out the infrastructure of the Ukrainians all in all. This means, and also the terror weapons of hypersonic missiles and things like that. But basically, what they're trying to do is knock out power facilities, knock out hospitals, knock out roads, run bridges, any kind of infrastructure that will weaken the people in the country as a whole.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that Ukraine fired hundreds of drones at Russia early Sunday, leaving one person dead. Basically, they targeted St. Petersburg and the flagship economic forum in St. Petersburg. That's what they targeted.
Well, notice about a month ago when they had May 8th parade or whatever, the Russians, of course, really celebrate the victory of World War II because they were the ones that did most of the fighting. 80% of the European theater happened on the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
8/10 of all German soldiers that died in that conflict died on the Eastern Front. When you combine that with all the other allies, and of course the Russians lost 28 million people. If you add up, the Americans lost 415,000. The British Empire lost about 400,000 people in the war. So when you're talking about 28 million people, that's something. If you're talking about soldiers themselves, nobody knows for sure, but it's around 14 million soldiers died. Russian soldiers died, 14 million, right? So if you take say all the other allies combined was 1 million, and it's probably not anywhere close to that. It's probably around 800,000. But say all the allies, the U.S., Canada, lost 1 million people in that war, and the Russians lost 28 million. They lost, just that country lost 28 people per every one that the rest of the allies lost.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, for example, the fighting style of the Germans differed on the Western Front than it did on the Eastern Front.
Well, one thing, on the Eastern Front, the Russians were fighting the very best of the German troops because they fought the Eastern Front for from 41, pretty much 42, 43, and 44. They were the best troops that the Germans had. By the time the Allies landed on D-Day, Germany was very much exhausted, and they sent some of their good troops to the Western Front, but most of their best troops stayed on the Eastern Front because that was where the biggest threat was coming from.
And besides which, they issued things like kill order. There is no taking of a Russian prisoner; you just kill them.
Yeah, well, they did take scores of them, but they also died in prison too.
Yeah.
So on the Western Front, all this BS about the Allied forces continuing to fight the Russians after the Germany was, anyway, this is beside the point. Basically, the celebrations that the Russians had after on May were much reduced because they were worried about drone attacks. Normally, it's a huge thing, and it was pretty big again, but they reduced the size of it and pretty much asked for a stall in the war while they could do this celebration, because this is a celebration that would and should have included the Ukrainians as well, because there were many Ukrainian troops fought the Nazis as well. So it was the Soviet Union. Anyway, I think they were pretty much given approval to go ahead. We won't bomb you, but they still didn't trust that and had a much reduced celebration. So the Russian people are very much aware of this war now. As in the early parts of the war, they weren't. It really didn't involve them much. But there are thousands and thousands and thousands of Russian troops dying here, and troops becoming casualties, and they may not be able to win this through attrition now because of the high rate of casualties. And you could, and this is right down to the Ukrainians basically improving their techniques, their war techniques, that all the rest of the world is watching and learning from.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, Poilievre promotes Canadian unity and accuses the federal government of stoking Alberta separatism.
We've talked about this before, but it's popped up in the news again.
Yeah.
Poilievre, of course, is a federalist. He believes in Canada as a whole, and he believes that in true conservative fashion, less government, more autonomy for the regions, more self-determination for the regions within the umbrella of Canada. That's pretty much a very conservative idea. Least regulations. You do what you want to do in your area, in your neighborhood, and we'll share things like trade and defense and other kind of things, and we'll keep our borders open. Yes, I agree with him that the federal government, the Liberals particularly, have fomented this separatist movement. And we warned about that on this show years ago. It didn't look good to me that the Liberals under Justin Trudeau were like the Liberals under Chrétien and the others. They did not regard the West with any kind of real.
Yeah.
They figure they need us more than we need them. They'll never separate. And Trudeau was completely, like, every day that goes by, the government looks dumber every day.
Yeah. Trudeau was unfortunately oblivious to a lot of the moves that were in the West. Every time the West said, "Oh, we need X," there'd be no. Our government is against whatever you just decided.
Yes. And
we're not developing mines, we're not developing wells, we're not developing our energy infrastructure, even though the world is crying out for Canada's energy infrastructure.
Yes. So this is being a big problem with Canada. It almost feels like when the Liberals and NDP come in, they're embarrassed by the amount of pollution we make while we're producing our oil. Well, the fact is, if the world doesn't get their oil from us, they're going to get it from somewhere else. So it really doesn't make sense to say, well, you got to reduce the amount of you have to have more regulations on your emissions. And then when you say we can't do that, the technology isn't there. And the only way we can reduce emissions is reduce production, and the federal government thinks that's okay.
Yeah.
So the federal Liberals astonishingly, it turned themselves around. So this is what the difference. This is the variability that happens within a party. The Liberal Party is astoundingly practical right now. It is like before it was like la-di-da, new age sensitive dude for prime minister that said a lot of stuff that and everybody liked, but he really wasn't that effective in the long run. And the policies of the Liberals were kind of weak and sort of spongy, and carbon tax, which didn't make any sense at all, and the government swelled to huge sizes, and our debt increased, and all that. And now we seem that same party has become very practical and pragmatic, and is trying to get Alberta oil to market. Quite a bit of difference, really.
Yeah.
Although I have to say the Trans Mountain pipeline was taken over by the Liberal government and made sure that Alberta oil did get to the coast there. So there's, although I don't think it's as bad as it seems to have appeared, but it definitely seems that bad to the average Albertan, and they're pretty much sick of Eastern Canada telling them what to do. So we'll tell ourselves what to do. Now, the folly of that, of course, Poilievre knows all too well. He is an Alberta boy himself, and so is Carney, and both of them are well enough educated and well enough knowing basically economy and all that, that they can realize that Alberta going off on its own will probably do worse for Alberta than it will for Canada, and they're going to make that point.
Yeah. And and basically I think at the end of the day, it's not just about the fact that he's the head of the Federal Conservative Party, but the fact that he actually personally believes that separatism is not the right move for Alberta.
Yeah, he believes that ideologically.
Yeah. Otherwise, he'd be a lot more silent upon it.
No, he's late. We've mentioned this last week or the week before that he's late to the game right now, but he is coming in very strong.
And so it's about his third or fourth speech on this topic. So he's coming in strong. Yeah, he might have been late to the party, but again, he's still coming in strong about it.
Yes, and not only that, he's asking for more autonomy for all the provinces, including Ontario, our province.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we need to restructure how the provinces work.
Yeah, and everyone has to remember right now the transfer payments, Alberta's doing a lot of the transfer payments to the other provinces. Quebec has always been needy. They don't transfer anything. But Ontario used to be the one that do the transfer payments. For year after year, Ontario did the transfer payments. They were the plus factor. Now Alberta is. Sometime in the future, Alberta may need transfer payments to come to them. Yeah. So there are all kinds of different things. What about CPP? What about pension? What about,
I'm not so sure transfer payments, whilst the federal government has to consider the income from across all provinces in terms of building its needs. I think it also has to consider the provinces are basically according to population, and in terms of how its money is spent. Right? So always then the bigger provinces population wise are going to get more back. Because projects have to be done, right? Anyway, anything else on that, Dave?
No, I just that I'm glad Poilievre is in, and this is now Poilievre is going to blame the Liberal government for this, as he should, I think, because the Liberal government has been too stupid on this, in my mind. I'm using strong language here, but no, they have been. They seriously saw this coming on and thought it wasn't a real threat to our country. And yet it seemed to me that it was, that the ignorance of the Liberal government was causing a lot of problems and out west, and that this time it would come to a head, and it did come to a head. And I think we could drop the blame squarely on the Liberal Party for being ignorant and to what Alberta is. Alberta was an embarrassment for the Liberal government when it went around doing its environmental thing everywhere.
Absolute embarrassment. Yeah.
Even Jane Fonda addressed down Trudeau. She said, "Oh, he's a great guy. He's going to do stuff about the Alberta tar sands and blah blah blah, and he's going to do this and that." When Trudeau was very limited on what he could do, she lambasted him. "Oh, look, all that Alberta tar sands and oil thing is still going. So Trudeau lied to us." Well, he didn't lie to them. But on the other hand, he didn't help his own Alberta people, That's So he was sort of this on the fence guy. He was supposed to be this environmental hero. Well, as like I said before, if the world is going to buy its oil, it's going to buy its oil from somewhere. If it's going to need 100 million barrels a day, and Canada decides it's not going to produce as much as it did, then the rest of the world's just going to make it up in other countries. The same amount of fossil fuel is going to get burnt, whether we make it or not.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Moving on. Welland's candidate preview. Okay, so we know that there's no regional election right now, and April Jeffs has tossed her hat into Welland as the mayor of Welland. Interesting, that one. A new one that was coming at some point, and also goes to show that I believe that Frank Campion is the top man for the regional chair job at the moment.
Yep. And so what's that going to mean? What does that mean? I don't even know. People.
At the moment, the mayor of there's actually the biggest in Welland. The biggest attention is being drawn to the position for mayor. You've got Natasha Bergen, Pat Chiocchio, Gary Graziani, April Jeffs, Brandon Simon, and Graham Speck, all fighting it out for the mayorship of Welland. Of course, April Jeffs is likely to be the best known of that bundle. There's no Ward 1 councillor yet. Ward 2 has had Aldo Perotta standing. Ward 3, nobody yet. Ward 4, Seftar Ali standing. Brian Green standing. Tissa Ratanayaka standing. And Terry Zogel standing. Ward 5, you've got Luca Mella and Claudette Richards standing. Ward 6, you've got Jamie Lee and Bonnie Fockens standing, along with Sean Vout. And the only school board people that you've got is 2 for the English school board, Sue Burnett and Steve Seuss, and 1 for the French school board, Amanda Leduc.
I don't know any of them. No. So Campion is not going to run again. Here's what you're saying.
Looks like Campion is going to be. Campion's the top man for the regional chair job. Right.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And therefore, April Jeffs is kind of slotting in as a former regional councillor, is slotting in, is wanting to slot in to the mayor's job.
Oh.
Right. Doesn't surprise me. It's kind of what we expect. And, I don't know what the chances of Campion winning that job, winning that nomination is. right?
Well, look, if you want some good governance here in Niagara, I'll run for mayor, but I got to have a Rolls Royce and a chauffeur.
We'll talk about the. Actually, I'm thinking that there's a couple of things we should get some people in from some of the people who stand once we've got a clearer picture of all the candidates, particularly Niagara and St. Catharines.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know much of the politicians in St. Catharines and Welland or West. I know a couple of them in West Lincoln, but I don't know many of them. I think our regionally, then, though, I think that's probably a bigger issue for us nowadays. But we don't even know how that's going to be sorted out. They haven't really decided anything yet. Yeah. I think so. You got this overabundance of information. You got this overabundance of study after study, and they still can't make a move. They still can't make a move on it one way or another.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we're going to do.
Yeah, and regional council. You know, the regional councillors that we have here, we have got we've got Bob Gale, of course, who was a regional councillor. We had we had the lady who was working for that organisation with Never Trust.
Yeah.
Right. And then we had
Miss Morocco, we're thinking, right?
Yeah, Miss Morocco, that's right. And then we, of course, have got our former Liberal MPP. Kim Crater. Kim Crater.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
they haven't actually last time I checked, they haven't actually put their names in to the slate. And I suspect that Bob Gale and I suspect that kind of Kim Crater may well be retiring, but maybe not. I suspect that probably my feeling is that Bob Gale will step down for a while, maybe go for a run at the mayorship later on.
I don't know. I don't know any of this yet. Bob Gale's still fighting this sort of, I think, sort of unjustified judgment on his character because of the historical book that he owns. Yeah. And then when he then when he had this historical book and these other historical documents, one from John Brown, I think it was John Brown, the famous violent abolitionist in the States. Then a lot of people went on and jumped all over it to question it and all this other stuff. So there was a general besmirchment of character. And when it wasn't working, that they were besmirching his character because he had Mein Kampf, a copy of Mein Kampf signed by Hitler himself. When that didn't work, then they started working on his other historical documents, kind of to besmirch him in that way. I wish they would just knock it off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you don't like his policies, talk about his policies.
Yeah. Don't talk about something else. Talk about policy. Yeah. Keep politics to policy.
Yeah. I mean, there was too much of an effort to besmirch his character. His political enemies thought, oh, well, here's a good chance for us to jump all over him.
Yeah.
And so if Bob Gale creeps back into politics or comes back into politics, I will sort of nod my cap to his bravery, but he's still going to have to face that because somebody's going to throw that in his face.
Oh, yeah, absolutely they will, which is why I think he'll stand down, let it go off the boil.
Yeah, I might have to wait a year or so before he gets back in. But look, here's a guy that's trying to do his duty, right? This is a guy who's trying to do his duty. So I don't understand the dislike. I gotta admit, we are too much of a rage-based people. In fact, I fall into this once in a while myself. We get angry at these politicians. We got to remember they're just human, and most of them are not corrupt, and most of them aren't ideologically bent. They do have reasonable. So I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Of course, June being June, we're in Pride Month, and now Cambridge councillors are speaking out following the Mayor Jan Liggett's controversial move to interrupt during a speech at a Pride event in Cambridge last week.
Yeah. Now, this Pride thing, I got kind of a little bit of an eye-opener on this myself. Normally, I think, well, isn't all that issue already done with? Isn't it already gone its way, basically? Have we already addressed this? Basically, let gay, trans, queer, whatever, they can have their own human rights as much as anybody else. However, my eyes got opened a bit when I heard a speech last week by a gay woman who was at a Pride festival, and people came in and all dressed in black, and they had signs saying, "You are an abomination. You are all kinds of really harsh words like that. You're abomination. You are I don't know, corrupted, whatever." And it was really, really harmful, hateful speech. Obviously from a very hard right religious group, it looked like to me. But it was, and then when the Pride people had secured the park for their celebration from the city, but when these protesters came in and were so brutal in their criticism, they called the police, and the police says, "We can't get rid of them because protest is legal." The real problem was that they had arranged to have that park for themselves for the gay thing, and these people intruded upon it and made it a very ugly experience for them. Yeah. Called them abominations and things like that, and the police wouldn't help them clear these people out. So that was a picnic and a party they were having, and this happened to them. They have problems, of course, in Montebello Park and other places like that. Basically speaking, like, to me, okay, I thought, well, that all that stuff is pretty much all done. It's only the fringe people that are doing stuff like that. But the fringe people can have a lot of effect. Yeah. Do you really go to a gay person and tell them they're an abomination?
Well, at one point, of course, a city mayor would have been invited to have given a speech at a Pride event.
Well, here in this particular case, the mayor was present.
Yeah,
the mayor was present, and during the speech, a student, a 17-year-old student, Mills was her name.
Yeah,
comes out and she starts to say a speech about Pride, and she mentioned a Cambridge counselor that was sort of very ignorantly crude and making fun of the pronouns they, them, and thou. Pronouns is that the 2 LGBT, whatever it is, community. Too many letters for me to remember. Anyway, so in any case, she was interrupted, and the mayor decided that they're going to, when this counselor mentioned this, and this is as an example of the kind of sort of derision that the gay and queer community have to go through all the time, as an example of the ignorance of this particular politician. The mayor stepped in and said, "No, that's enough. That's enough. He's already suffered enough of this." In other words, she interfered with the delivery. There wasn't much to that speech anyway. She was just pointing it out that this is the kind of thing we have to kind of put up with. The particular counselor apparently has addressed that issue, and the mayor stuck her nose in that and stopped the person from speaking the way they should have spoken.
And I have a problem with stopping. Like, you're talking about a 17-year-old fresh, school student who's learning to speak and probably terrified by standing up there in public and making a speech. And as a Toastmaster, I'm appalled. You know, as a former Toastmaster, I'm appalled by such a person interrupting a young speaker who wants to say their thing. And the thing is that it's also true within politics that people you can have a right to criticize politicians. You have that right. You may be wrong, but you have that right.
Yeah, you have a perfect right to criticize politicians. I think pretty well. I think that the mayor overreacted. The mayor, the mayor walked into this and
seemingly,
but for some reason she thought she was the boss of the universe in that particular situation. She didn't really listen to what the kid had to say. She thought that the counselor was being derided. No, actually, the counselor is a public figure, and the counselor said things that they should not have said, or written things they should not have said. And those things that they said were born of ignorance. Yeah. And so that's what the student was pointing out, but she was stopped from doing this. So the mayor in that particular case thinks she's the moral arbiter of the world. She is not. She should let the kid speak, or if she was worried about the speech, listen to it ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think we'll leave it at that. Also, Rick points out it's Italian month in June. Yeah. Okay. So
Italian month and gay month all at the same time. It's Pride Month and Italian month. So we're expecting a lot of gay Italian people marching down the road.
I'm not saying anything either way, sir.
Yeah.
I'm not. I really am not. Hey, good luck to both hit sets of people. Yeah, let's find something about Italian month, okay?
Well, okay. Yeah. Well, all I see it now is there's going to be there's three streets. One street, the Pride Parade is going to go down. On the first street, on the third street, the Italian parade is going to go down, and the one in the middle is going to be gay Italians going down that one.
Okay, if you say so.
Anyway, I'm gonna remind everybody of Gaza again. Gaza hasn't changed much at all. We can see what Netanyahu is doing in southern Lebanon. They're gonna right now. The United States is the one that's telling both of them to knock it off. The United States will not. Trump is really under a lot of pressure because you have a lot of hawks in the United States now that want to continue the war with Iran. They want troops to go there. They want another forever war, and that makes a lot of people a lot of wealth. That's what I'm following the money here. The military industrial complex makes incredible amounts of money. It employs 800,000 people minimum to make weapons, and there's huge amounts of money being made. And we could see this when every time you look at the portfolio of the councilors and the senators, how much money they're being made out of defense contracts. I have a feeling if you follow the money, you'll follow the reason why there's a war half the time. Somebody's getting money out of it and getting rich. I think in this particular case, Trump, I think he realized what a big mistake he's made. But can he rein in Netanyahu? And Netanyahu is a cold-blooded fish anyway. He'll kill 100 kids just in case there might be one Hamas soldier in the building. He'll kill everybody in the building to get to them. And it might be a low-level soldier too. So anyway, I don't know how we may be in a situation where AIPAC and the Israeli lobby hasn't got a whole lot less power than well. For now, AIPAC and the Israeli lobby has extreme power, and that the Axio type of report that said Trump swore at Netanyahu is exactly the same kind of Axio report that came out when Biden was supposed to have sworn at or got tough with Netanyahu The fact of the matter is, no one ever did. And actions speak louder than words. Trump is not stopping any amount of munitions going to Israel. But he has stopped them going to, or arrested them going to Ukraine. But he won't for Israel. He just keep giving them more and more bombs. So actions speak louder than words. We'll see what kind of actions come forward.
All right. And Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.